Okay, so adjectives, adjetivos. These are describing words. So when we are describing a person, a place, or a thing, whatever words we use to describe that, those are adjectives. And they're the same in Español, in Spanish. We use adjetivos to describe, para describir. So one adjective you might think of is nice or kind, simpática. Or maybe someone is athletic. Okay, alguien es atlético or atlética. So we need to make sure that when we use adjectives, we are using the correct form of the adjective depending on who our subject is, el sujeto. So who are we describing? And in Spanish, to make sure that the adjective agrees with the subject, okay, que el adjetivo está de acuerdo con el sujeto, we need to make sure that we do a couple of things first. That's what we're going to learn today. So if you're just getting here, you don't need to go anywhere. I just want you looking at my screen. Okay? So our objective for today, we want to be able to identify the correct form of the adjective to describe the subject. So la meta de hoy es identificar la forma correcta del adjetivo para describir el sujeto. Right? So one way that we need to make sure the adjective agrees with the subject is by gender. So we learned about this a little bit, but people and objects in Spanish have a gender. Okay, in English, only people have gender, right? But when we're talking about people, for example, in English, if we are describing Maria and Marco, so we have one boy, one girl, we don't change the adjective to match a gender. So we say Marco is tall and Maria is tall. The word tall doesn't change. It doesn't matter. Even though Marco and Maria have gender, it doesn't really matter when we describe them, when we use adjectives. But in Spanish, in Español, it does matter. So for example, if I'm describing Roberto, he is masculine, he is a male. So first of all, I would say Roberto es mi amigo, okay? Whereas if I'm describing someone feminine, such as Raquel, I would say Raquel es mi amiga. But if we're describing them using adjectives, we also need to make sure that we are using the correct form of the adjective. So many adjectives are either going to end in O or A, depending on if it's masculine or feminine. If it's masculine, it'll end in O, and if it's feminine, it'll end in A most of the time. So for example, if we want to say that Robert is serious, él es serio, ending with an O. But if we want to describe Raquel, we would say ella es seria. We would end it with an A. Same with an adjective like timid or shy. Tímido, Roberto es tímido or él es tímido. If we're describing a girl, we would say ella es tímida. So if you see an adjective that ends in O, make sure that if you're describing a female subject, if the subject is feminine, that it ends in A. So that's one way that it can agree with the subject. If the adjective describes a male and a female, if you are describing a male and a female, we use the masculine form of the word. Here's why. Spanish is a patriarchal language. I don't know how many of you have heard of the word patriarchy. Give me either a yes or no in the chat. Have you heard of the word patriarchy? Do you know what that means? Or patriarchal? Anyone?
I heard it, but I don't know what it means.
Okay, so it means male dominated. Okay, so what this means is that anytime that there's a male involved, even if there are females as well, we're going to use the male form of the adjective or the male subject pronoun. So for example, when we were learning about subject pronouns, los pronombres sujetos, and we take one like nosotros, right? Nosotros means we. If we're describing a group of just girls, we would say nosotras, okay? But the second we're describing a boy too, even if it's like 90 girls and one boy, because we put that male in there, now we have to use the male form, nosotros. So it works that way with subject pronouns. It also works this way with adjectives. So for example, if I'm saying that Camila and David are kind, I would say Camila y David son simpáticos. If I was only describing Camila, I would say Camila es simpática. But I have to use the male form because we have a male in there. So whenever you're wondering if it should be a masculine form of the word or a feminine form of the word, if there's any males in there at all, you have to use the masculine form. So we just learned about adjectives that end in either O or A. What if the adjective ends in E? What do we do then? How do we distinguish between masculine and feminine subjects? Well, we don't really. It's going to stay the same. So if I'm describing Marco, and I want to say he's intelligent, I say Marco es inteligente or él es inteligente. Same with Maria. Maria es inteligente or ella es inteligente. So now we've discussed adjectives that end in O, A, or E. So O, A, and E, those are all vowels, son vocales. What if an adjective doesn't end in a vowel? What if it ends in a consonant, which is any letter that's not a vowel, right? So in this case, again, the word is going to have the same masculine and feminine form most of the time. So for example, if we have the adjective intelectual, so they're intellectual, we would say Marco es intelectual or él es intelectual. Maria es intelectual or ella es intelectual. Okay, it's going to stay the same. It ends in L. That's a consonant. The only time this is going to be different is if that consonant is R. If the consonant is R and we need to make it feminine, we just need to add an A. We're not taking away the O. We're adding an A after the R. So Marco es trabajador. He's hardworking. Él es trabajador. Or Maria es trabajadora. Ella es trabajadora. So these are just some general guidelines and rules for when you are making sure that the adjective agrees with the subject. So we learned that the adjective needs to match the subject in gender. Okay? There's a second one, and it's number. We need to make sure that whatever adjective we're using is singular if we're describing one person or thing. If we're describing more than one person or thing, then our adjective needs to show that. It needs to be plural. So for example, if I'm only describing Marco, that's a singular subject. I'm just describing one single person. Marco es alto, or él es alto. But if I throw someone else in there, now my subject is plural. I'm describing more than one person. So I need to say Marco y David son altos. I'm adding an S. Okay? We add S's to things a lot in English to make them plural, right? The difference is that we don't add the S to the adjective. If we're saying Marco is tall, and Marco and Davion are tall, tall doesn't work. Or sorry, tall doesn't change. Okay? The only difference is that in English, we add an S to the noun. So if we're talking about the boy is tall, and we want to make that plural, we would say the boys are tall. We would add the S to the noun, to boys. Now we're adding the S to the adjective. Alto, altos. Okay, and if it ends in a consonant, you can add es. So, María es intelectual. María y Diana son intelectuales. So to make it plural, we're just adding an es. Okay, now I need everyone's participation in the chat right now. If you're looking at this first example, Marco es alto. Marco y Davian son altos. Let's look at this very first one. Marco es alto. Which word in this sentence is the form of ser? One word in this sentence is the form of ser, to be. This is what we worked on yesterday. Good job, Chisamaga. Yeah. And Alan and David Excel. Good. Shahalini, yeah. So the version of ser that we are going to use is es. Okay, so remember, ser means to be. So in this example, we're using the verb to be tall. We need to use the form of ser for él. Él es alto. He is tall. So es is the form of ser. What about in this example? Marco y Davian son altos, or ellos son altos. Which word is our form of ser? Good. Yeah, so son is going to be our version of ser that we're going to use because our subject is ellos. So it's a similar change from saying Marco is tall. Marco and Davian are tall. Okay, so again, if we are describing one person, so he or she, él, ella, or a thing, an object, or usted, you formal, we're going to use es. If we are describing multiple people, so you all, or they, ellos, ellas, ustedes, or multiple things, then we use son. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's how we have to connect what we have been learning to what we're learning right now, because it all builds on each other. Okay, so if an adjective ends in Z, it is the same for both masculine and feminine subjects. So this follows the same rule that we learned earlier, that if an adjective ends in a consonant, it has the same masculine and feminine form. So like intelectual, right? So it's the same with one that ends in Z. Z is a consonant. So él es feliz. Ella es feliz. The reason why Z is important is because if we are changing it from singular to plural, we need to take out the Z and replace it with C. So quitamos la Z, we take out the Z, y ponemos la C, we put in the C, and then we add ES. Él es feliz, that's singular. Ellos son felices. They are happy, that is plural. Now we're describing more than one person. Good. Last slide. So a major difference between Spanish and English, we've discussed this a couple times, but it's really important that we have a good understanding of this. So in English, people have gender, right? Male, female. In Spanish, objects also have gender. And this is not just in Spanish. Romance languages follow this same rule. So Spanish is a Romance language, Italian and French are Romance languages. Objects have gender too. So the table has gender. The seat has gender. The TV, the house, all of these things also have a gender. We need to learn how to figure out what the gender of the object is. Here's how we find that out. On the left in green, here are some examples of masculine objects. A lot of the time, masculine objects are going to end in O. So libro, horno is oven. Okay, so that's one hint. It doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes words that end in O aren't masculine, but that's pretty rare. Most of the time they are. But sometimes we have words like guante, that ends in E. So if we see el guante, how do we know that that is masculine? You have to look at, this is called an article. This translates to the, okay? El, los, la, las, all of those would translate to the. The book, the oven, the glove, the table, the chair, the house. If the word for the is el or los, that object is masculine. Okay, it's male. If the word for that is la or las, then that object is feminine, okay, or female. So we have to make sure, for example, when if we're just describing the color of an object, if we have a male or masculine object, el horno es rojo, see how rojo ends in O. Whereas here, when we're saying, well, the chair is yellow, la silla es amarilla, we're ending that with A. You can also say roja or amarillo. You put in the O or the A depending on what you're describing, the subject, el sujeto, is masculine or feminine. And then we also have to make sure that it agrees with the number. So are we talking about a singular object or are we talking about a plural object? If it's plural, we probably need to add S. So this first one is going to be singular. El libro es interesante. We're describing one book. The second option is plural. Los libros son interesantes. The books are interesting. Now we're describing more than one book. The oven is red. El horno es rojo. That's singular. One object that we're describing. Or plural. Los hornos son rojos. So there's a few major differences. First is with the verb ser. We're changing it from es to son. Es is for single objects or people. Son is for plural. We are also adding an S. Okay, interesantes, rojos. Or if the adjective ends in a consonant, we're adding es, azules.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is this all we're doing today?
Yes, Justin. We're going to do some practice questions together as a class after this, but this is the only lesson that we have for today. Okay, so same thing with feminine objects. La mesa es grande. The table is big. This is singular. We're only describing one table. If we want to make that plural, now we're describing more than one table. Las mesas son grandes. La silla es amarilla. Las sillas son amarillas. The house is... yes?
I have a question.
Yes, David Excel.
La mesa es grande. The word grande, is it in masculine or in feminine?
So grande is going to stay the same depending on if we're talking about masculine or feminine. So remember, one of our rules is that if the adjective, if our describing word ends in E, so grande or inteligente, it's going to stay the same regardless if it's masculine or feminine. So this is a feminine subject. La mesa es grande. But if we were describing the book, yeah, so la mesa is feminine, we say grande. If we were describing the book, which is masculine, el libro, we would still use grande. El libro es grande, because it stays the same.
Okay, I now understand.
Okay, good. So that's the last slide. So what the main thing we're taking away from this lesson is that when we are describing something in Spanish, okay, cuando estamos describiendo una cosa o una persona en español, we need to make sure that the adjective matches the subject in gender, so male or female, masculine or feminine, and in number, singular or plural. So we're going to practice this together. If you can go, please, to Google Classroom and open up, here, I'll show you. We need to open up, I believe it's in week 7, semana 7. Oh, I need to, it's right here at the top. Sujetos y adjetivos. Sujetos y adjetivos.